A couple of weeks ago I made a video about my experience with electric vehicles, and many of you agreed with the conclusions that I came to in the comments. If you haven't seen that video yet, I've put a link to it in the description, and it's certainly worth a watch if you're interested to switch to an EV, but you're not sure or you want to know more about it. My wife and I quickly got to the point where we wanted to make the change, and so the next question was, how do you go about buying one? Are there differences between buying an EV as opposed to buying a traditional internal combustion engine vehicle? I knew exactly who to speak to, Jim Starling, and some of you might already know his YouTube channel, Definitely Not a Guru, where he talks all things EV and motoring in general. He was kind enough to let me interview him recently so that you can benefit from all his knowledge and insight as well. Let's see what he had to say on the matter. So, hi Jim, thanks for making time to come onto my channel and talk about EVs. I'm a solar channel primarily, but recently I released a video about EVs because I think it's quite an important part of having, a solar battery and an EV to either for financial reasons or environmental reasons. So everything kind of goes together. Yeah. So I'm starting to turn my attention to EVs and what that's all about. And I figured you are the guy to talk about EVs. I love watching your videos on the channel, and I've got a few questions for you, if that's all right.
Yeah, by all means, fire away.
Okay, so I released a video a short time ago where I kind of described my experience to date with EVs. It was all very new for me, and actually if anyone's watching the channel, you haven't watched that video, it is worth watching, especially if you've got an internal combustion engine car and you're thinking about getting an EV but you don't know where to start or what to look for. Hopefully I can save you a lot of time and a lot of pain. But in that video, we were trying to get experience of EVs. We'd never driven one before, so we'd joined this car club in Oxfordshire and we'd hired a couple of cars. Unfortunately, they only had the MG models, but we drove an MG4 and then an MG5. So we got experience of that. Yeah. And then we were going on holiday and our Audi car, which is an internal combustion engine car, the clutch died. And so there was no way that was going to get fixed before we went on holiday. So we thought we'll just use this opportunity. So we went to Hertz and just hired an EV, whatever they had. It happened to be a Polestar 2. Right. Yeah, we hired that for a month initially, and then I think I extended it by a couple of weeks. And we had such a great experience, I was really, really surprised how good it was. Yeah. And maybe we can talk about some of the aspects of that in terms of owning an EV. But we're now at the point where if we want to buy an EV, how do we go about that? Is it like buying any other car? Or, what other aspects have we to think about? And for my situation, we could buy it personally, but I do have a company as well. So that might be another option. And we don't really understand which is best, or, we'll be doing a lot of driving on a personal basis and maybe some driving on a business basis, that sort of thing. So maybe that's a place to start then, Jim. Where, how should we go about this?
Yeah, so let's start the most basic thing, I guess, which is if you're going to buy new or used. Okay. And buying new is a really bad idea when it comes to EVs. And it's because the depreciation is so heavy on them. Right. Now, there are several reasons for that, and it's almost like a perfect depreciation storm. You can read certain newspapers that will tell you it's because EVs are terribly unpopular and they're awful and they're all going to catch fire. And there's so much anti-EV sort of propaganda.
I've seen a lot of that.
Yeah, it's clearly being funded by someone with perhaps interests in oil. I don't know, but it's an extremely well-funded campaign. But if you are to buy a new EV, it's going to depreciate a lot, most of them, simply because huge numbers of people buying EVs are companies buying them as company cars or leasing them as company cars. Right. They sit in the market for 3 years. They are used as a company car typically, and then they're back in the market. And there have been more people getting into EVs for tax reasons, because it makes a great deal of sense to have an EV as a company car versus a diesel.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so for example, if you went from a 5 Series diesel BMW and you're a 40% taxpayer and you changed over to a Tesla Model Y, you could possibly save £7,000-8,000 a year in your personal tax.
Wow. Okay.
So it makes massive sense for company car drivers to get into them. So that's almost like artificial demand at the top of the supply chain.
Yeah.
But that then comes back into the market and it's getting saturated. Add on to that, you've also now got lots of companies and businesses offering salary sacrifice schemes.
Yes, I've seen those. Yeah.
So that allows you to lease a car using money at kind of your gross pay level. So you're in effect giving away some of your gross pay.
Yes.
But it's not seeing the tax man at that point.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay. Right.
And again, it's a great saving. Somebody personally to get, say, a Tesla Model Y and insure it and maintain it might be paying £600-700 a month through a salary sacrifice scheme. Possibly the net cost to them is about £300-350.
I see. Right. Okay.
There are huge benefits in that. And again, it's almost artificial demand because you've got people getting EVs for different reasons than I just want an EV.
Yeah.
They're being kind of induced into an EV.
Being persuaded. Certainly.
Yeah.
All right. So all those EVs are now coming back onto the market as second-hand cars now, flooding the market effectively.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So you've got that complete sort of flooding of that particular market. And let's say, I think the current figures, the end of June, the EVs versus petrol car new sales is something like 20% EVs versus 80% petrol. If you look at just those classes of vehicle. The other reason why you shouldn't buy a new EV and why depreciation's possibly a bit of a ticking time bomb on a new EV is because at any point someone can come and disrupt the market and the technology is moving at an absolute rate of knots. So I've got a Tesla Model Y, standard range, rear wheel drive, 280 miles is the WLTP range figure on it.
Yeah.
Next year, Tesla will announce the facelift version of the Model Y. That will almost certainly have 320 miles of range, and it will probably be cheaper to buy new than the current one is.
Okay.
So immediately my car's going to devalue for those two reasons, and the fact, of course, there's been a facelift model out. To go to a further extreme, we're now looking at things like solid state battery. Toyota have now said that they could release a car with 700-800 miles of range. BMW have said actually they could do 1,000 miles, but there'd been absolutely no need for it because who does 1,000 miles in a day? So that could ramp up massively, and range anxiety is still a big thing for lots of people that are used to petrol or diesel cars.
Right.
It's something that you probably have in the early stages of having an EV, and then it kind of fairly quickly.
Well, I mean, for us, it was exactly like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the first couple of times we went out in an EV, and we weren't going that far, but we could just see the number of miles left, clocking down at a much faster rate than I thought it should be. And we were quite concerned about it. So we felt that range anxiety that people talk about, and we'd go and top up. But then, half an hour later, we'd be almost in the same position again. It's like, crikey, what's going on? But you're right, over time it got better because actually all you need is a bit of planning. And when we were hiring these EVs, you would just go and pick them up from a location somewhere in Oxford, and it might only have 60% on it. So you weren't starting out at 100% to begin with. So that didn't help. But of course, if you're owning an EV, you're charging it overnight, it's 100% in the morning, ready to go.
Yeah.
You're probably only doing 50, 60 miles there and back for that thing that you're going to do that day. So what does it matter? And if you're going on a long trip, and we went up to Scotland and then we went down to the Lake District, we were using the public charging network. And you know what? It wasn't as bad as people were making it out to be. I think we got better at it. I think the first few times we didn't know how to actually use the machines, how to get them to work, so that we felt you could see people coming up after us in their car to doot, 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 off they went, and we were still struggling. But we figured it out in the end. So actually, it was quite easy to do. So yeah, that was our experience. Difficult at the start, but actually over time it got a lot easier to the point where it's not a problem. You know. All right. Well, let me ask you this question then. There's no doubt about it. New EVs are expensive, and we've never owned a new car in our lives. So at most, we'd buy one maybe 3 years old. We've got this company. We wouldn't be doing a lot of business miles on it. We'd certainly be doing some business miles on it, like coming today to see you, for example. Would I still be better off buying used, do you think, for the first EV? We'll end up buying 2 EVs eventually, I would imagine. And even if I buy, I think you described that you could buy a new EV through your business and there was some tax benefit in the UK for that. Is there still a tax benefit if you buy a used EV through a business, or does it not make sense then? How does that work?
Yeah, so as you know from videos on my channel, I talk a lot about leasing and the benefits of leasing. And that's one way to protect yourself against the depreciation.
Right.
It's because some of the lease deals are so incredibly tempting that it becomes less of a problem. And my advice to everyone with an EV is to lease new and buy used. And it's as simple as that. It's a very general rule, but 9 times out of 10, it works.
Yeah.
If you run the numbers, and there are lots of videos on my channel where you can see me running those numbers. For a business, again, you've got the option to buy or lease. Now, if you were to buy it as a business, as a limited company, you can effectively write off 100% of the cost against profit in the first year. So
is that for a new car?
Yeah, that's only for a new car.
Only for a new car.
Yeah, so effectively, you're going to save 19%. If you're on 19% corporation tax, you're going to save 19% on the cost of that car.
Wow.
You then have to pay benefit in kind on it personally because that's a company car for you.
Yeah.
But things like the insurance, maintenance, tyres, that kind of stuff is a company expense because it's a company asset.
Oh, I understand. Okay, so actually for those reasons, that might be enough, I guess, once you do the numbers, because insurance has gone up, tyres are not the cheapest thing in the world.
And if you're leasing the car, again, you can sort of write off the upfront payment and the monthly payments against profit. So
So tell me, let's start again on leasing then, because I don't know very much about it. I'd like to think it's as simple as you pay a fixed amount of money a month for a fixed term, which might be, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. And at the end of it, you give the car back. Hopefully you haven't damaged it. And if you have, you have to, they'll charge you for whatever it costs to repair. Is that about it, or is there more to it than that?
That is about it. Yeah.
Okay.
So there'll be an upfront payment. You can actually choose not to have an upfront payment. You can just spread the whole thing over 36 months or whatever it may be. You'll then say how many miles you're going to do in the car. If you go over that mileage at the end of your lease, so if you do a 10,000 mile a year, 3-year lease, and you return the car and it's got 31,000 miles on it, they'll have an excess mileage fee.
Okay.
And that could be anything from 3 pence a mile to 60 pence a mile. So something to understand in your contract.
Yeah.
And then there's a fair wear and tear guide. Something that puts a lot of people off leasing is that they've got a friend's brother leased a car 20 years ago and he sent it back and he got a £4,000 bill or something.
Right.
I think they were the Wild West days of car leasing, personally.
Okay.
And I've leased, I don't know how many cars personally, and with my previous employer, I ran a small company fleet there.
Yeah.
And only once have we been attempted to be fleeced.
Okay.
And one phone call got rid of it, 100% of it.
Oh, right.
And the rest of the time, the charges are really fair. So,
I mean, we'll wreck the alloys. I mean, you can take that as a guarantee.
So, as an example, we had a VW Touran for 4 years, and I've got a couple of young kids.
Yeah.
My wife uses the wheels as side parking sensors. So They looked like someone had taken a shotgun to them. Inside one of the door sills, my son had slammed the door on the seatbelt, I don't know how many times.
Okay.
And I was really worried about that because that looked extremely expensive.
Yeah.
We had scuffs on the bumper, and I took it to a local body shop and they quoted me 900 quid to put everything right.
All right, okay.
However, at this point, I didn't know about the damage to the inner sill.
Right.
Because I'd looked around the outside of the car in the seats and things, I hadn't sort of examined the door sills.
Yeah.
I got something through from VW because it was done through a leasing broker, but the financier was VW Finance.
Yeah.
And it said about their charges, and I got their list of charges and the body shop charges. And the alloy wheels, for a start, I think they were £80 plus VAT with the body shop to do each one.
Right. That's not bad, is it?
And, well, I didn't think that was too bad, 80 quid plus VAT per wheel.
Yeah.
VW was £60 including VAT. And it went back with all that damage because I decided just to let VW have it back. And they charged 250 quid.
Which is really reasonable.
Yeah, and you are allowed scuffs and you are allowed stone chips and things, but if the scuff is big, or there are lots of them in the same area, or there are significant scratches that have gone through the paint, they're the kind of things that they're going to pull you up on.
Right.
But they do always send you a leaflet 3 months in advance saying, this is what's acceptable, this is what's not.
Yeah, so you know where you stand.
Yeah, by all means get it corrected or send it back and we'll charge you accordingly.
Wow.
So it's not too much of an issue, I don't think, these days.
Okay.
If you after a new EV leasing, I strongly recommend you look into it, and there is loads of stuff on my channel to help with that. Well, now, if you're looking at possibly a used EV through the business, first, privately, there are incredible bargains for used EVs because all that depreciation's happened that we talked about earlier. So
all the cars coming back onto the market.
Yeah, so for example, a 3-year-old VW ID3, which would have cost you 37 grand. You can get one of those for about 12 now.
Wow.
So yeah, there are real bargains out there. 4-5-year-old Tesla, 15 grand. So, you know, it's a lot of people will look at a car like a Tesla and think it costs the world, the earth. It doesn't. If you were to buy a used one through your business, again, there are some tax breaks, but they're nowhere near as attractive. So you can still write off 100%, but it's going to take you 5.5 years to do it because you can only write off 18% a year.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
And then when you also factor in, you're going to have to pay a bit of benefit in kind tax personally on it. And everyone assumes that once enough of us have done it, the government will decide to milk that particular cash cow.
Yeah. Well, in London, so we went to London recently, and the number of EVs that we saw driving around London, I guess because of the zero emissions, so ULEZ. I thought it was great to see it all. I guess it's hurting some people because if you haven't got an EV and you can't afford one, how do you get in and out of town? But yeah, I don't know what it is, but I do see more and more people, like you said, that did you say 20% EVs and 80%?
Yeah,
roughly about that.
Yeah.
And I guess that's growing every year.
Yeah, so, I think new EV sales this year are up 9% on this point last year.
Yeah.
And I think last year was up, I think 16% growth last year.
Okay. So even if you're in a position where you can't afford a new one now, it perhaps might not be too long before those prices come down into your range.
I mean, you can buy an EV now for 2,000 or 3,000 quid.
Right.
It will be an old Nissan Leaf with not very much range.
Yeah.
But I couldn't have made that statement 18 months ago.
Yeah. You know? And actually that would be good enough for just doing school runs and things like that.
Yeah, just for getting to work and back.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it's perfectly adequate.
Yeah. One thing I saw on your channel, you regularly do videos where you're looking at lease deals, particular lease deals for different vehicles. Lease Loco, I think, is one that you recommend. And on that, I don't know, you've got some sort of utility on there that kind of shows what the prices used to be.
Yeah.
And typically, over time, they've dropped. And some of them have dropped quite significantly, haven't they?
Yeah.
That is wild.
Now, a big reason for that is the zero emissions mandate. So
Right.
manufacturers now have to sell a percentage of their vehicles as zero emissions vehicles every year.
Yeah.
This year it's 24%. And if you're Tesla, that's not a problem. But if you're Volkswagen, that's probably a bit of an issue. And especially if you're Toyota, where you've got one EV that's not amazingly good,
Right.
that's an issue. So there are various things they can do to offset. There's a big lobby at the moment to allow more credits against that mandate from hybrid car sales, being led surprisingly by the likes of Toyota.
So what happens? You get fined if you don't meet your target.
It's £15,000 a car.
£15,000 a car.
Yeah, so it's huge.
So that's really punitive then.
Now, the companies like Tesla and Polestar can sell some of their credits to the other companies.
Oh, I see. Right.
Because obviously they've got way too many credits. They're 100% EV.
Yeah.
But still, companies need to get rid. And I think rather than just purely having cars in their showroom with 15 grand knocked off the sticker price,
Yeah.
they're going out to the lease market.
Got you.
And lease companies can also go along to the manufacturers and, for example, approach Volkswagen. I mean, at the end of last year, the VW ID Buzz went from £900 a month, £800 a month on a lease to about £400.
Wow.
For 2 weeks, and they were all 2-year deals. They'll all be back in the market at some point.
Right.
So imagine the December next year, there are going to be 800 ID Buzz on the used market. So there's another depreciation hit coming.
Yeah.
But one lease company effectively can go to VW and say, I'll take 800 cars off you. What's the discount? Knowing that there's potentially a £15,000 fine.
Yeah.
To offset for VW somewhere else on 800 vehicles potentially, or percentage of. There are some really good new car deals around.
Okay.
Yeah.
So ultimately, we, consumers and business owners, we can benefit from this.
It's an absolute buyer's market, the likes of which.
But we do need to be on the right websites like Lease Loco and things like that to find the deals.
Yeah.
And to be on there regularly, I guess. To be there when it happens, because I noticed that you sometimes do almost like a flash video to say, look, there's a deal on this car, but if you want it, you're going to have to act like in the next day or so.
Yeah. I had one just yesterday actually, and the first thing this morning, I'm waking up to comments saying, oh, it's gone. And I say to people, subscribe to my channel, put the notifications on if you're in the market right now, and be prepared to act quickly. I mean, one of the craziest ones I've ever seen was last month, was the Lotus Electre, I think it's called, big SUV.
Is this an SUV, right? Okay.
£3,000 a month down to £1,000 a month.
Wow. Now,
£1,000 a month is still silly money for most people for a car.
No, but it's the price drop.
But if you're in the market for a £3,000 car,
that's incredible.
Yeah.
So there's one other thing I wanted to talk to you about, Jim. Then, EVs, of course, have got large batteries in them. And we're all worried that what happens if you spend, let's say, £20,000, £30,000 on a second-hand car, and only to find out that the battery dies, 2 or 3 months later. What do you do then? And what should we be thinking about to kind of avoid that situation? And what is the chance of a battery dying?
So I'm not a battery expert by any means, but for one thing, I think you can go onto Auto Trader and look at the number of EVs that are around with 200,000+ miles on them.
Okay.
And that should give you some degree of confidence.
Yeah.
And the number of old Nissan Leafs that are still on the road, Mark I Leafs that had no kind of thermal management or anything, and almost broke the rules that we would have now for in many ways, and they're still going. Yeah. And there are certainly some EVs where battery packs can be repaired, and in fact, individual cells can be replaced. So it's something where there's a lot of nonsense in the mainstream media about it. I personally know of a guy that ran an airport taxi firm, and he had 3 drivers in a Tesla Model S, one of the first Tesla Model S that I'd seen, I think. And that car was in service 24 hours a day, and they would just go into Heathrow and back all day long. They just did Heathrow in it, and it never charged on a slow charger. At the time, if you bought a Tesla Model S, you got supercharging free.
Yes.
So you could use all the Tesla superchargers for free. So it's running an airport taxi business with no fuel cost.
Fantastic.
Now, in short shrift, that car had done 400,000 miles, and it was the only one in, I don't know if it was in Europe or in the world, but it was the only one that had done 400,000 miles. So they asked for it back so they could run a load of tests and gave him another one in the meantime. And I think in the end, they just said, keep the new one, because we want to keep messing about with this. But I saw another YouTuber made a video just a couple of weeks ago that they bought an ex-taxi Tesla Model S with 400,000 on it, and I think it lost 25% of its battery range.
Only 25% in that? That's incredible.
But I think with the battery chemistry makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
So some will they'll lose a bit of range very quickly, like in the first few years, and then it just sort of stops.
Yeah.
Or you might lose 1% a year or something like that.
Yeah.
And then years of nothing, and then it suddenly sort of falls off a cliff.
All right, so it's not linear. It's
no. I think LFP batteries are supposed to be more linear.
Yeah.
And certainly the way you treat the battery is different. Like an LFP, you can charge to 100% and be completely happy and safe about that.
Yeah.
With others, it's much better if you only charge to 100 when you really need to, and you keep it at 80 the rest of the time.
Right, okay.
As a maximum.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to read about all the different battery chemistries, and I'm not really the man to give you that. There's a guy called Ewan McTurk who's
I think I've watched a couple of his videos. He really is in depth about technologies like that, isn't he?
Yeah, he's an absolute expert. So I would suggest.
Okay.
Well,
what about warranties then? Because someone like myself, I don't know much about batteries. I just don't want to make a large investment into, let's say, a second-hand vehicle, only to find out I've got a massive bill if something big goes wrong. So are there any warranties available for things like batteries and stuff like that?
Potentially you could get a warranty on the battery from the manufacturer, but the difference with an electric car and an internal combustion engine car, typically you'll get a 3-year warranty with most brands.
Yeah.
Most EVs come with an 8-year warranty on the battery, some a 10-year warranty on the battery.
Well, that's fantastic.
So you've immediately got...
That solves the problem for me.
Yeah, you've immediately got sort of 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Where if it drops below a certain number in those 8 to 10 years, then you get a new battery.
Oh, I see. Right, okay. Oh, well, I think you've answered it for me then. I don't need to worry because we probably only own the car for that length of time anyway. In fact, I'll be lucky if the car is still running at that length of time.
The other interesting thing is people are always concerned about the battery, massively concerned about the battery. And I always say it would be like buying a petrol car and only worrying about the engine block. There are 200 odd moving parts in an engine. There's a gearbox, there's a clutch, there's everything else that goes with it. And in an EV, you've essentially got a battery, a motor, suspension and brakes.
Yeah.
And not a great deal else, and I think the electric car motor's got something like 12 or 15 moving parts.
Yeah. I mean, contrast it to my Audi that we were talking about earlier. So the clutch died. So they're having to take the whole engine out just to get to the clutch. So that's going to cost a fortune. I had a gearbox problem with it. So that was a fortune. I remember that a few years ago. And I think I had a head gasket or something like that go. So that was a lot of money. And I won't have any of these kinds of problems with an EV.
And the cost of servicing it.
Tell me about that then. So I would typically pay for my car about £300 every time it was serviced. Mm-hmm. So what is it like for an EV?
They all differ, but typically there's not a service as such. They would suggest you take the car for an inspection.
Yeah.
I think on my Tesla, for example, I think the first thing to do, aside from getting someone to look over it and they also suggest rotating the tyres. So you take the front wheels off, put them on the back, back wheels and stick them on the front, just so the tyre wears more even. But I think it's 50,000 miles is a cabin filter.
Is that it?
Yeah. And I've read that you can get those for 16 quid. So,
right, okay.
You know,
so it's a different league of servicing then. It's,
yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, it's just good practice to get your brakes checked over once in a while and those kind of things.
Yeah.
But when you think there's no oil and no filters as such, and it's a huge part of the expense and a huge part of something that, certainly if you're buying a used car, you can get a service book with lots of stamps in that the man in the dealership's just put in there for you very nicely. But you don't know the history of that car. You don't know how it's been serviced, if it's been serviced, really.
Yeah, that's always the scary bit, isn't it? But it sounds like there's less to go wrong with an EV, and that alone should give buyers confidence. All right, so I think for my wife and I think we'll probably buy a second-hand one first, partly for cost, and we'll try and look for one that's got a long warranty on the battery, and that way we don't have to worry then. And then I would love to lease a bigger car eventually. I don't know when eventually is. I have to try and persuade my wife about leasing. She's always like, buy it, don't lease it. But I'm saying it's effectively a depreciating asset. So we'll have some discussion about that. But yeah, okay. I'm looking forward to this. Certainly my experience of trying these EVs, I will never buy another ICE car again.
Yeah.
Absolutely not, no question. I will only buy EVs going forward. And that might sound a strong statement for me to make, but I think for people who haven't tried EVs, just spend a couple of hours trying one and be prepared to have any conceptions that you had about it to be changed.
Yeah, that's really great advice, actually. Yeah. I get EVs in all the time because obviously I do the car reviews. And so many of my friends have been converted just by, is this a blah blah? So it's electric, and then you say yes it is, and then they go out with you. So, this is really quiet and really smooth, and it's quite quick, and this is all nice. All these gadgets, I like these. And then you always know, because generally about 10 or 15 minutes into the drive, you'll get how much does it cost? How much does it cost to charge? What's the servicing like? Yeah. You then start to get all the questions and you think, okay, here's another one.
Yeah, and that's the big thing, isn't it? It's not just the cost of the car. You have to look at the total cost of ownership. Yeah. And actually, I think people probably don't realise how much they spend on fuel over the lifetime they own a car. So I love it. It's a whole new world for us. And, so far what we've seen, delighted with. And I just hope that I'll probably be chatting with you more, Jim, about particular cars and what you think. Yeah. And can't wait to actually own an EV or two in time. Yeah. Well, listen, Jim, thanks very much for taking time out with me.
Thank you.
I know you're a really busy guy on stuff. And I'll keep you in touch with what we're doing. And let's see how things go.
I look forward to seeing it.
All right. Cheers then.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the interview, and as a result of my discussions with Jim over the past few weeks, my wife and I took the plunge and we purchased our first EV. It's a Kia e-Niro. Over the next few months, I plan to create some videos on how you can maximise the benefits of your own EV, integrating it to an overall strategy for your renewable energy journey, including, of course, solar panels and home batteries. And if you haven't done so already, I recommend you check out Jim's YouTube channel. It's called Definitely Not a Guru, and he's got a large number of videos covering all manner of EV and other motoring topics. He also provides a service where you can chat with him one-on-one to discuss potential ways forward for your own EV journey. I'll put links to both of these in the description. And as ever, please don't forget to like the video if it's been useful to you, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next video. Cheers for now.